Well, I did my first trip on board a working barge. That was December 1955, and I'd just left sea school at the time because I'd always been interested in barges. I'd seen them come in and out of Great Yarmouth when I was young, and I just couldn't wait to have a sail on them. Mm-hmm. I was indentured to the New Zealand Shipping Company, so I did a trip with them out to New Zealand, and when I got back in 1956 it was off on the first barge that one could find.
And how old were you then, Hugh?
I was 17 then.
17 when you got back? So.
17 when I got back, and then I spent what time I could, I suppose, for the next 2 or 3 years in sailing barges. Because they were coming to an end, purely and simply. I wanted to go into barges before the trade died.
So you were quite aware that the barges were coming to an end?
Oh, we all knew that. I mean, I think 1955, I think we probably had 30 barges which had sails on them. 1957, that number was down quite considerably. And I think that by 1958 there was only Anglia and Marjorie and Cambria, May, left under sail.
No, they were based up in Yarmouth?
No, they were based, Cambria was sailing out of Greenhithe, and then the others were based at Ipswich.
And
so that was the end of an era, you see, and they'd fitted auxiliary engines to most barges by then.
And a lot of them had been sold off for houseboats and come out.
Oh yes, I mean, you know, what did barges the damage was the war. Because most barges, instead of working through the war, they were used as ammunition hulks or balloon barges, you see. So when they came back from the war, they were in poor old state, and most owners just took the government grant and laid them up and scrapped them. So, you know, I think that at the end of the war there was probably 700 barges vaguely left in trading condition, and within a few years that number was down to a couple of hundred. So it was the last years of it, but also it was the last years of the docks. I mean, the whole business in the docks was coming to an end. You know, it wasn't long before you had containerisation being mooted. The whole system of bringing big ships right up into London, putting them into places like the Victoria Dock. And you see, with a big ship, you've got to unload a bit, and then you've got to load a bit. You can't empty them out because they'll capsize. They'll topple over.
And that's why they used to load them into the lighters and the barges.
That's right, and that took a long time. So you'd have a cargo, and there'd be one parcel in one hold, another one in the bottom of the hold, another one somewhere else. So you'd come alongside, you'd load maybe, I think I made a note once in the Tilbury, I think that was City of Oxford or City of Durban. No, in the West India, that was it.
Yeah, West India docks.
Yeah, and we loaded 200 bags, and then we had to shear off for the rest. And Beatrice Maud had come in before us, and she had loaded, I noted, 1,100 bags. So we only had 200 back across the dock. Lighter came alongside. Next day we load a bit more. And all the time all you've got is manpower.
You had the dock crews, the dock workers used to come and help you load off.
Well, they had to do. We couldn't do any loading or unloading in London.
Because that was the unions, was it?
Now, it was all unionised. So what happened is you got up to London. First thing you did was you waited for orders. So you go alongside, sometimes we'd go along the jetty at Cliff, near Gravesend, ring up from the Cement Works wharf, ring up the owners, see if they got a cargo for us. If they hadn't, we'd go up and lay on Woolwich buoys.
Yeah, with a lot
that
of other
was 1957, yeah, and I reckon that most buoys had 5 barges on them. There were 2 sets of buoys, so there'd be sometimes a dozen barges, motor ones, sailing ones, all waiting for cargo. Then they had a lady, a Mrs. Riley, who lived just up the road when you went ashore on the causeway. But she had a telephone, you see, so she got paid by some of the owners.
Yeah.
So if there was a call, she'd come running down, you know, sort of call for Ruperta or call for Phoenician, something like that. You'd row at Scala Shore, trot up there, get on the phone to the owners, and that's it. They'd tell you where to go. And now you see a barge like this at Cambria that we're on at the moment, because she had no engine, that was more difficult for her. You weren't supposed to sail in the docks.
Nearly all the barges had engines then, didn't they? They were
nearly all of them had engines, but
yeah.
see, I can remember Anglia sailing through the Royal Docks. Cambria occasionally would do so, but you'd try and get a tow off a tug and
Yeah.
a stream of light as you'd tie onto the end of that. You might be, from the time you got to the lock gates, lay off the lock gates, to the time you got to your berth could be 3 or 4 hours. You had to go through all the lighters, you had to move them out of the way, then you take your dolly rope, that's on top of the windlass, you've got a little barrel. There's 600 foot of rope on there, very light, very strong. So you'd trot off, take that outside ships, everything, crawl over everywhere, put that out somewhere, and then you'd heave yourself across the dock and windlass. Then they didn't want to open the bridge unless you gave them beer money or...
Does Tower Bridge, or was
Oh
that
no,
into
these are the bridges in the docks.
Oh, in the docks, I see,
Yeah, every dock had little bridges, you see. So, I mean, if you were going for timber, you went into the Greenland entrance of the Surrey docks. Then from the Greenland you'd go through a series of cuts, and we'd load in Russia Yard. So by the time we got to Russia Yard, that was probably 4 hours of hard work. And then when you got there, you'd have to wait for your ship. And sometimes the ship wasn't in, and the ship would have the same trouble getting through. The tugs would have to tow that through, move everything out of the way. And then you'd go alongside when they called you. So you had the dockers, you made tea for them all day long, then you had to give them beer money. And being a sailing barge, they didn't want to work, because that was, loading a sailing barge was much harder than a ship with an open hold. So they wanted more money for it, and if they couldn't get the money, you know, off their end, they'd want some off you. So bribery and corruption went on.
It was rife.
And then they loaded you, and I looked in my book the other day, and we loaded 7,000 pieces of redwood. That's 2 before.
That came over from Canada, didn't it?
No, that came over from the Baltic on a ship called the Bojan. When she came into the Russia Yard, she was leaning right over like that. She had a big deck cargo listing all over. And that was 31 standard of timber we took on board. And the note I got in my book, that said we had a stack 4 foot forward and 6 foot aft. So that meant you couldn't see over the top of the wheel.
They were stacked right up, like
Stacked right up, yeah,
above deck.
6 foot above the hatches aft.
Right,
That's quite a long way up.
Yeah,
When
quite
they'd
a long way.
finished us, we had a list on us that was so much that I worried that she'd topple over.
Where were you taking the cargo?
Up to Manningtree.
Which is quite.
So where we took the cargo to was the other side of the dock, took all the timber off the top and restacked it properly, otherwise she'd have gone, she'd have capsized. She'd nearly rolled over in the dock. They'd given us such a rotten stow.
Yeah.
Anyhow, we
Try and get
sorted
rid of
that
you.
out. We got to Manningtree, and I wrote in a little booklet that the way those dockers at Manningtree worked, and their courtesy and all the hard work and everything, those London dockers could have learned a lot off them. They were lovely guys. Because loading timber, I mean, you pick up a rough old piece of 4x2 timber or 2 before, and you'll soon get those splinters in your hands. You'll come back, your hands are raw.
You've got to wear gloves, haven't you, with that?
I don't think we could afford gloves.
Health
I
and
got a
safety.
pair of mittens. And you see, you did this in winter. That's the barges today don't. People who sail on them don't know what it's like going to sea in winter.
They basically go. They're moored up
Well,
for
all
winter,
my
aren't
yeah,
they? Laid up.
well, you can't because of insurance, you see.
Yeah.
But you know, when they sail in summer, they sail with 4 foot of freeboard. Well, on one side. In
But when you-
winter,
when
we
you're
were
fu-
lucky to
yeah.
have 4 inches.
So you're fully laden in rough seas and
Oh, yeah.
coastal seas.
In heavy weather, you'd have water on deck, but you expected that. That's not a problem. That's what they were built for. But you know, you had a cabin fire below, and that was nice. And a cabin like Cambria, that's lovely and comfortable. And in the evening, you'll get in there, and you might have 4 or 5 hours sleep before the tide made. And I looked, you know, the notes I made in my little book. That was quite often we mustered at 3:30 in the morning, and we're underway at 4 o'clock. So I wrote some of them down in my little book here, and then you see you'll get away from the docks, you'll get down perhaps as far as the Lower Hope or Southend, and if the wind was bad, and we've got a full gale coming tonight, we had one the other night, you're not going to lie at Southend.
That was a force 5, wasn't it? That gale.
Not with us the other day. That
Was it
wasn't.
more?
No, we had that 40 mile an hour winds.
Oh, yeah.
So they're giving 60 to 70 tonight. But
Right.
you see, you wouldn't want to lie off Southend like that. So you'd run back to the Lower Hope, where you'd get a bit of shelter, you see, just below Gravesend, and tuck in over there where the powder hulks were.
And how
then-
many barges would you see like that, you know, in that sort
Oh,
of weather?
sometimes there'd be half a dozen, all running back from Southend. And that's motor barges as well, you see. I mean, though they didn't have any sails, they didn't have big engines.
When it gets rough like that, they just tuck in there.
Well,
to
it's the wind, you see, that's the problem, because that's going to whip up a sea. It depends where it is, but you'd quite often get a few force 8s, maybe a force 9, sometimes a force 10 over a winter time. And you couldn't, you know, if you were lying at anchor somewhere and you couldn't sail, we had this, I looked through there, went through my notebook, we got up, we were going at groundnut cake up to Mistley. And we got into Parkston that night, in Harwich Harbour, Parkston. There were some boys there just past the berth. And we lay on one of the buoys, and I got my note says that blew force 9 that night. That snapped our mooring ropes, and with a southwesterly wind we were driven back, got round the corner fortunately of Shotley, and were able to anchor up.
Did you
there.
hear it in the night? You heard it snap?
Oh, we heard it snap. We knew the barge was underway on its own.
Yeah. How many of you were on board at that time?
That's only 2.
Only 2
That's
all the
only
time,
2.
yeah. Because sometimes you had 3, didn't you?
Cambria most of the time was sailed 2-handed.
It's amazing how such a big craft, you know, you with 2.
Well, you know,
Two
you
hands,
let
not-
the barge sail herself, you let her do the work, because you'd never do it, you see. So, you know, when you were laden, you didn't sail against wind and tide, you couldn't. So you made the best of it, and sometimes you'd have a gale up your backside, so you'd have to be a little careful. You didn't want to jibe all the time. You don't want a following sea right up behind you, so you'd sail at an angle to the wind. And, you know, many a time we had to cross the Spitway at night.
And that was, which barges were you sailing on? I know.
Well, under sail, with a small engine, there was the Ethel Maud, and there was the Ruperta and Varavia. And then later on, 1958, I went into Convoy, which was a motor barge. Now, she was running to Yarmouth.
And that had no sails then? In those
Well,
days?
no, we had a little, what we call a leg of mutton sail. We had a foresail, we could say, and a leg of mutton sail, which was basically probably an old foresail stretched out, using that as a little bit of mainsail, but they steadied you in a seaway. And you get a lot of sea if you were running to Yarmouth. So we'd have that set most of the time. And yeah, the Yarmouth run was, most times we'd go into Harwich,
Yeah, and with the cargo, not only timber, what you would take.
Oh, that was
like you say,
that was
cattle
wheat,
cake.
cattle cake to Yarmouth, sometimes Norwich. Other barges went up to Beccles.
So we'd mostly be picking up the cargo in the London docks then.
Yeah,
and then-
we'd load grain from the elevator in the whatever it was, the Royal Docks, or in the West India Docks, and then one trip we took 125 tons. Cambria took 125 tons, and we got up to Yarmouth. I think we left in the morning, and we were in Yarmouth. We were in Harwich that evening, and next day Yarmouth, and then Cambria came down, and we towed her up to Norwich. And just as Bridgeman called us ahead, because you've got a lifting bridge at Yarmouth, the Haven Bridge. So he called us ahead, we pulled out from the quay, we got Cambria on a long tow rope, and then the bridgeman comes out of his hut and he waves his hands like that. Bridge is stuck, he says.
So?
We did 180-degree turn, because we could, with twin Gardner diesel engines. On the way back we met Cambria still coming up.
Oh yeah, I bet, yeah, with no...
So we had to wait, and then eventually, that's just before Christmas. It was a beautiful day, and there's 3 barges going up across Breydon Water and up the River Yare.
Very nice.
Beautiful sight that was. And
Yeah.
you see, some winter sailing was lovely. A beautiful day is, and that when you were young, you enjoyed it.